Alyssa Tan was 22 years old, studying graphic design at a university in Kuala Lumpur. In August 2019, during Malaysia's Hungry Ghost Month, she was living alone in a small studio apartment in Cheras, while her roommate had gone home to Penang for the month. Her grandmother had given her very specific instructions before Ghost Month began. Don't stay out late, don't swim, don't hang wet clothes outside at night, and most importantly, if someone knocks on your door after 11 p.m., don't answer. Don't even look through the peephole. Alyssa had nodded politely, the way young Malaysians do when their elders share superstitions they don't really believe anymore. She was educated, modern, rational. She didn't seriously think that ghosts roam Malaysia during the 7th lunar month. That belief lasted until August 17th, 2019, at 2:33 a.m. Alyssa was awake, working on a design project due the next day, when she heard 3 distinct knocks on her apartment door. Knock. Knock, knock. Not aggressive pounding, not urgent banging. Just 3 calm, measured knocks, like someone politely announcing their presence. Alyssa's first thought was that it must be her neighbor with an emergency, maybe a water leak or a fire alarm issue. She stood up from her desk, walked toward the door, and was about to unlock it when she remembered her grandmother's warning. She stopped. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. "Who is it?" she called out. No response. She waited 30 seconds. Nothing. Maybe they'd already left. Maybe she'd imagined the knocking. She returned to her desk and tried to focus on her work. 5 minutes later, the knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. Same pattern, same rhythm, same polite, measured sound. This time, Alyssa walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No neighbor, no person, no one standing outside her door. But the knocking continued. She could hear it clearly, feel the vibration through the door. 3 knocks, then silence. 3 knocks, then silence. And it was coming from her side of the door. Whatever was knocking wasn't in the hallway. It was inside the door itself. Or maybe it was something that didn't need to exist in normal space to make the knocking sound. Alyssa backed away from the door, her heart racing. She grabbed her phone and texted her grandmother. "Amma, something is knocking on my door, but no one is there. What do I do?" Her grandmother called immediately, her voice sharp with urgency. "Did you answer the door? Did you unlock it? Did you invite it in?" "No, I just looked through the peephole." "Don't look through the peephole. They can see you looking. They know you're home now. They know you're alone." "What's knocking on my door?" "Hungry ghosts. It's Ghost Month. They're testing every door, every window, looking for people who will answer. People who will invite them in. If you don't answer, if you don't acknowledge them, they'll move on eventually. But if you answer, if you open that door..." Her grandmother didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Alyssa spent the rest of that night sitting on her bed, as far from the door as possible, lights on, phone in hand, listening to the knocking that came in waves every 10 to 15 minutes until dawn. Knock, knock, knock. When sunlight finally broke through her window around 6:30 a.m., the knocking stopped. Alyssa opened her door cautiously. The hallway was empty and normal. Her neighbors were leaving for work, nodding hello as they passed. Everything looked ordinary, but on her doormat, there was something that shouldn't have been there. A single joss stick. The kind burned during prayers for the dead. It was standing upright, somehow balanced on the mat, burned down to a tiny stub. Someone or something had left an offering at her door during the night. Tonight, we're going deep into Malaysia's Hungry Ghost Festival and the supernatural rules that protect people during the 7th lunar month. We're sharing Alyssa's complete story, along with testimonies from other Malaysians who've experienced the knocking phenomenon. We're explaining why answering your door during Ghost Month can be dangerous, what happens when spirits enter your home, and how Malaysian Chinese, Malay, and Indian communities all share similar warnings about nighttime knocking during this period. This is what happens when you answer knocks you shouldn't answer. This is why Malaysian grandmothers warn their grandchildren every year, even though young people roll their eyes. This is why the superstitions exist, not to scare you, but to protect you from something that's very, very real. Welcome to Malaysia's Hungry Ghost Month. Welcome to the 30 days when Hell's gates open, and wandering spirits walk freely among the living. Welcome to the time when a simple knock on your door might not be coming from anything human. And whatever you do, don't answer. Alyssa didn't tell anyone about the joss stick. She was still trying to convince herself it had a rational explanation. Maybe another tenant had placed it there. Maybe it was coincidence that it appeared the same night the knocking occurred. Maybe the whole experience had been some kind of stress-induced hallucination, brought on by working too late. But her grandmother knew something had happened when Alyssa didn't respond to messages the next morning. She called repeatedly until Alyssa finally answered, barely awake. "Tell me everything," her grandmother demanded. Alyssa recounted the entire experience, including the jaw stick. Her grandmother was quiet for a long moment, then "Pack a bag. You're coming home to Charos with me. You're not staying alone in that apartment during Ghost Month." "Amma, it was probably just a jaw stick on your doormat. Means the spirits marked your door. It means they know where you live. They know you're vulnerable. They know you're alone. It means they'll be back. This isn't negotiable. Pack your things." But Alyssa didn't pack her things. She was 22, independent, living on her own for the first time. She wasn't going to let superstition drive her back to her parents' house like a frightened child. That night, the knocking didn't come. And Alyssa felt vindicated. It had been a fluke, a strange isolated incident, meaningless. For 3 nights, nothing happened. She slept normally, worked on her projects, texted her friends, went to campus during the day. Everything was fine. On the 4th night, August 24th, 2019, in the middle of Hungry Ghost Month, the knocking returned. But this time it was different. It was different. Instead of 3 patient knocks, it was rapid, insistent banging. Boom, 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 boom. Like someone pounding urgently on the door, demanding entry. Alyssa jolted awake, her heart pounding. The banging continued. Relentless, angry, almost. She checked her phone. 3:17 a.m. She got out of bed and walked to the door, checking the peephole again. Empty hallway. No one there. "Go away," she said, her voice shaking. "You're not welcome here." The banging stopped abruptly. For about 30 seconds, there was complete silence. Then she heard something worse than knocking. Something was running its fingers slowly down her door. Long, deliberate scratching sounds, like fingernails, dragging against the metal door frame. Starting from the top of the door, moving down, 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 toward the lock. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound was methodical, patient, as if whatever was on the other side was examining her door, looking for a way in. Alyssa backed away, her phone already dialing her grandmother. "It's scratching my door," she whispered urgently. "Amma, it's trying to get in." "Stay in your bedroom. Lock your bedroom door. Don't go to the living room. Don't look at it. Don't acknowledge it anymore. Just stay in your room, and don't look out." "What is it? What does it want?" "It wants you to invite it in. It wants to know if you'll open the door. It's testing you. Testing your fear. Testing your resolve. As long as you don't open that door, it can't cross the threshold. But if you open it, if you give it permission to enter, you're giving it access to your life, your energy, your home." Alyssa locked herself in her bedroom and sat on her bed with her phone, lights on, listening as the scratching continued for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes. When it finally stopped, around 4 a.m., she didn't feel relieved. The silence was worse than the noise. The silence meant it was waiting. To understand what was happening to Alyssa, you need to understand Malaysia's Hungry Ghost Festival and the spiritual context in which these incidents occur. The Hungry Ghost Festival occurs during the 7th month of the lunar calendar, usually falling sometime in August or early September on the Western calendar. During this month, according to Buddhist and Taoist tradition, the gates between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead are opened. Hungry ghosts, spirits who died suddenly, violently, or with unfinished business, are allowed out of the underworld for this month. They wander the earth looking for food, water, attention, and living people to interact with. Unlike ghosts that are strictly bound to specific locations, hungry ghosts are mobile. They can go anywhere. They can access anywhere. Malaysia, being a multi-ethnic nation with Buddhist, Taoist, Hindu, and Muslim populations, has a rich syncretism of ghost beliefs. Different communities have different ghost traditions, but they all recognize the reality of the 7th lunar month as a dangerous spiritual time. The Chinese Malaysian community celebrates the festival with prayers, offerings, and elaborate religious ceremonies. Paper boats and lanterns are burned to send supplies to deceased relatives. Temporary altars are set up in public spaces. Red lanterns are hung, food is offered, prayers are recited. But underneath the celebration is a deep current of caution. The festival isn't just about honoring the dead. It's about managing the danger that comes with so many spirits being active simultaneously. Malay Muslims often don't celebrate the festival openly, but they maintain their own protective practices during the 7th month. They increase prayers, avoid certain locations, and practice spiritual cleanliness. Many Malays believe that even though the festival is a Chinese and Buddhist tradition, the spiritual activity is real and affects everyone regardless of religion. And then there are the specific types of spirits Malaysians fear most. The Pontianak is perhaps the most famous Malaysian ghost. She's the spirit of a woman who died during childbirth and was never given proper burial. Pontianaks are violent, vengeful spirits who appear as beautiful women to lure men, then attack them. They can be heard crying in the night, especially in areas where they died. The Toyol is a tiny spirit, about the size of a child, created through black magic to steal things for its master. Toyols are mischievous, immoral, existing only to serve whoever created them. During Ghost Month, Toyols become more active and harder to control, sometimes going rogue to steal on their own. The Hantu Raya is a large shape-shifting spirit that can appear as a woman, a man, an animal, or something undefined. Hantu Raya spirits are particularly dangerous because they're strong-willed, intelligent, and actively malevolent. They don't just haunt locations, they actively hunt people. And then there are the generic hungry ghosts, spirits with no specific origin or purpose except their hunger. These ghosts are desperate, potentially dangerous, but not typically violent unless provoked. When Alyssa heard the knocking and scratching, she didn't know what type of spirit was at her door, but her grandmother knew enough about Malaysian ghost lore to be very worried. The behavior, repeated knocking, testing the door, showing awareness of Alyssa's presence, suggested something intelligent and persistent, not a random hungry ghost passing through, but a spirit with focused interest in Alyssa specifically. "Did you go anywhere unusual before this started?" her grandmother asked during one of their phone calls. "No, nowhere unusual. Just campus, the food court, the library." "Did you see anyone die? Or hear about a death nearby?" "No, nothing like that." "Did you wear red clothing? Did you go to any temple or shrine? Did you touch anyone's grave or tomb?" All of these are ways that people can accidentally attract spirit attention. According to Malaysian folk belief, wearing red during Ghost Month attracts spirits. Visiting temples or sacred places can create spiritual connections. Touching graves can disturb the spirits resting there. But Alyssa had done none of these things. As her grandmother eventually concluded that the spirit had simply marked Alyssa as vulnerable, young, alone, living independently away from family protection. Hungry ghosts, particularly during Ghost Month, actively look for people they can access, people without strong spiritual protection. And Alyssa, living alone in a modern apartment building without traditional spiritual protections, had essentially announced to every ghost in the area that she was available. The second and third nights of knocking and scratching were preparation. The spirit was testing her resolve, seeing if she would eventually break and open the door. On the 4th night, August 24th, 2019, the spirit changed tactics. The knocking stopped completely. Instead, Alyssa heard a voice. It came from outside her apartment door, but not like someone speaking through the door. It was more like a whisper that somehow carried through the solid wood, as if the voice was traveling directly into her mind rather than through her ears. "Alyssa," the voice whispered. "Alyssa, open the door." It sounded like her mother's voice. "Your mother is here. She wants to come in. Let her in." Alyssa knew this was impossible. Her mother was in Petaling Jaya, 10 kilometers away, but the voice was so convincing, so exactly like her mother's tone and accent, that she had to fight the urge to go to the door. This is one of the most dangerous aspects of hungry ghost encounters, according to Malaysian lore. They can mimic voices perfectly. They can impersonate people you love. They can use your emotional attachment against you to manipulate you into opening doors or inviting them in. Alyssa called her mother immediately, just to confirm she was home, safe, far away. "Why are you calling at 3 a.m.? Her mother said sleepily, confused. "Just checking you're okay." "Of course I'm okay. I'm sleeping." "Why? What's happening?" After confirming her mother was genuinely home and not at her apartment door, Alyssa hung up and addressed the voice directly. "I know you're not my mother. Leave me alone." The voice stopped. But then came the knocking again, more aggressive than before. Boom, 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 and underneath the knocking, that fake mother's voice, now angry, now accusatory. "You rejected me. You rejected your own mother. You're a bad daughter. Let me in so I can teach you proper respect." Alyssa finally broke. She called her grandmother, crying, begging to be picked up. "I'm coming," her grandmother said immediately. "Lock all your windows. Stay in your bedroom. Don't go anywhere near the door. I'm coming now." Her grandmother arrived at the apartment 30 minutes later, carrying several cloth bags containing what appeared to be herbs, papers, candles, and other items Alyssa didn't recognize. The moment her grandmother stepped into the apartment, the knocking and the voice stopped. Immediately, completely, as if someone had flipped a switch. Her grandmother spent an hour performing what she called a cleansing ceremony. She burned specific incense throughout the apartment, hanging talismans of red string and paper with Chinese characters above every door and window. She placed small mirrors facing outward to reflect negative energy. She anointed salt water on the door frames and windowsills. "This is basic protection," her grandmother explained as she worked. "The joss stick on your doormat, the knocking, the voice, these are all tests and invitations. The spirit is trying to establish a connection with you. The ceremony I'm performing breaks that connection and makes it clear to the spirit that this home is protected. Will it come back? Probably not. Not during this ghost month. But you can't stay alone anymore. You're staying with me until ghost month ends. After that, we'll perform a more permanent protection ritual on your apartment." Alyssa gathered her belongings and left the apartment that night, not returning until after September 20th when ghost month had officially ended. When she finally went back to check on her apartment, the talismans her grandmother had placed were still there, aged and dusty but intact. And most importantly, the door was completely unmarked. No joss sticks. No signs of spiritual visitation. Whatever had been trying to access her apartment, whatever had marked her door with that initial joss stick, had apparently given up. But Alyssa never lived alone again during ghost month. What happened to Alyssa is far from unique in Malaysia. Stories of knocking during ghost month are common enough that they've become a recognized cultural phenomenon, shared among young people through social media, told by elders as warnings, discussed in online forums dedicated to Malaysian paranormal experiences. The specific pattern of Alyssa's experience, initial knocking, then escalation when she refused to answer, then mimicking a loved one's voice, is so consistent across different incidents that it seems to follow an actual protocol that spirits use to try to gain access to homes. According to traditional Malaysian Chinese beliefs, there are specific rules about spirit activity during ghost month. Spirits cannot enter a home without permission. They can knock, they can scratch, they can create noise and call voices. But they cannot cross a threshold unless invited in by a living person. Answering the door is an invitation. If you unlock the door, or even just fully acknowledge the spirit and give it your attention, you've created an opening. Some traditions say that even speaking directly to the spirit, beyond telling it to leave, counts as acknowledgement. Spirits test boundaries repeatedly. If they find a door or window they can't enter, they'll keep trying, increasing intensity each time, hoping to wear down the resident's resolve. Spirits can mimic voices perfectly. They study people by observing them and listening, then replicate exactly how loved ones speak, including accent, dialect, mannerisms. This makes them extremely dangerous, because people's emotional responses to loved ones' voices often override their rational mind's warnings. The threshold is absolute. A door or window acts as a spiritual barrier. Once you cross it, you're in the spirit's power. But as long as you stay inside and don't answer, you're protected. Mirrors and salt are protective. Mirrors reflect spiritual energy. Salt creates barriers that spirits cannot cross. Placing mirrors facing outward, reflecting negative energy away, and salt on windowsills and doorsteps are traditional protective measures. Red cloth, incense, and prayers are protective. These items are spiritually charged with protective energy and can create a perimeter that spirits respect or cannot enter. These aren't just folklore beliefs that old people hold. They're practical guidelines that have been tested by generations of Malaysians trying to stay safe during the spiritually active 7th month. But it's not just Chinese Malaysians who experience this phenomenon. Malays, who are predominantly Muslim and might not celebrate Ghost Month formally, report similar experiences with knocking during the 7th lunar month. They interpret the experiences through an Islamic framework rather than a Buddhist/Taoist one. But the pattern is the same. Something knocks on your door at night during Ghost Month. If you answer, bad things happen. If you don't answer, the knocking eventually stops. One Malay woman named Nur Aziza shared her experience on a Malaysian paranormal forum. During the 7th month, my whole family heard knocking on our door late at night. My husband wanted to answer it, but I remembered what my mother warned. She said no matter what, never open the door during that month. My husband didn't believe, but I convinced him not to answer. The knocking lasted about 20 minutes, then stopped. The next morning, our neighbor said she heard knocking on our door all night, but couldn't see anyone when she looked out. She was confused, but I knew what it was. I did prayers, burned some incense, and it didn't happen again. My husband now believes. This multicultural consistency is significant. You have Chinese Malaysians warning about hungry ghosts, Malays warning about something they might call a jinn, or another Islamic supernatural entity, and both groups experiencing the same phenomenon, knocking that shouldn't be answered. This suggests that either the phenomenon is cultural, people experiencing what they expect to experience because they've been conditioned by folklore, or the phenomenon is real and exists independent of cultural frameworks. Multiple cultures encounter the same spirit activity and interpret it through their own spiritual traditions, or it's some combination of both. Skeptics tend to favor the cultural explanation. They argue that people expecting to hear knocking during Ghost Month are more likely to notice random sounds and interpret them as supernatural activity. They might knock on their own door and forgot sleep-drunk behavior, or a neighbor might be knocking, or it's wind, pipes, normal building sounds. But skepticism tends to fall apart when confronted with the consistency of protective measures working. If these were just hallucinations or misinterpreted normal sounds, then protection rituals shouldn't have any effect. Yet the testimonies consistently report that, after protective rituals, the knocking stops. After mirrors are placed and talismans hung, the spirit activity ceases. After someone spends Ghost Month in a protected home, the phenomena don't recur. When protection measures lapse or are removed, the activities sometimes resume. This pattern of cause and effect suggests that something real is being affected by these protective rituals. Whether that something is supernatural or psychological is a philosophical question, but the practical result is undeniable. Malaysian people who follow Ghost Month protective practices report fewer problems than those who ignore them. After Alyssa's experience, she became obsessed with understanding what had almost happened to her. She researched Malaysian ghost folklore, interviewed her grandmother and relatives, and eventually became knowledgeable enough about the subject that other people started asking her for advice. In November 2019, about 3 months after her apartment incident, Alyssa was studying at the University Malaya Library when a young man approached her table asking if she was the girl from the viral Facebook post about the Ghost Month knocking incident. The post had been shared widely on Malaysian social media. Someone Alyssa suspects one of her relatives had shared the story online, and it had resonated with enough people that it was being discussed in multiple forums and Facebook groups. The young man, named Rizwan, said he'd experienced something similar. "It happened to me in KL too," he said, "during Ghost Month. I was alone in my apartment in Bukit Bintang, and I heard knocking on my door at 3 a.m. I almost answered. I was confused, thinking maybe someone needed help. But something made me stop. I looked through the peephole, and the hallway was empty. I decided not to open it, but the knocking continued for hours." "Did you eventually open the door?" Alyssa asked. "No. I called my mother, who told me the same thing your grandmother told you. Don't open the door." Eventually the knocking stopped around 6 a.m. But here's the weird part. The next morning, I found a joss stick on my doormat. Just like in your story. Same thing, same place on the mat. This confirmed for Alyssa what she'd already suspected. The joss stick is a marker, a way that spirits indicate they've tested a location and found someone vulnerable there. Over the following weeks, Alyssa collected more stories from people who'd experienced similar incidents during Ghost Month. A woman in Shah Alam heard knocking that sounded like someone trying to break down her door. She locked herself in her bedroom and didn't respond. The knocking escalated to pounding that made her walls vibrate. After about an hour, it suddenly stopped. She found a joss stick on her doormat the next morning. A graduate student in Cyberjaya heard 3 distinct knocks on his window, not his door. He didn't respond, but he did look out the window, a mistake apparently. He reported feeling watched for the rest of Ghost Month, even though nothing else happened. He didn't find a joss stick, but he reported an increased sense of spiritual presence. A woman in Petaling Jaya heard her husband calling her name from outside their bedroom door. He was already asleep beside her. She knew something was wrong and didn't respond. The voice repeated her name about a dozen times, then stopped. No joss stick in the morning, but she reported feeling drained for several days after. A family in Klang heard knocking late at night and ignored it, but their young son had opened the door without them knowing. Nothing dramatic happened. The child wasn't harmed, but the family reported that for the next 3 days, all of them experienced nightmares of someone trying to enter their home. After they performed cleansing rituals, the nightmares stopped. What struck Alyssa most was how consistently the stories aligned with the traditional warnings her grandmother had given her. The knocking started, the resident either responded or didn't, and the outcome depended on that choice. If they responded, opened the door, looked directly, acknowledged the spirit, something negative happened. Sometimes dramatically negative, possession, illness, accidents, sometimes less severe, nightmares, drained feeling, sense of being watched. If they didn't respond, refused to answer, ignored the knocking, went back to sleep, the spirit eventually stopped trying and moved on to other homes. Alyssa compiled her findings into an article about Ghost Month safety for a Malaysian lifestyle website. The article went viral, with tens of thousands of shares and comments. Interestingly, most of the comments fell into 2 categories. Category 1, people from Malaysia and other Asian countries, confirming similar experiences and protective practices. Category 2, Western skeptics, dismissing the entire phenomenon as cultural superstition and delusion. What was notable was that the skeptics were almost entirely people who didn't live in Malaysia or other Southeast Asian countries. The people actively defending the reality of the phenomenon were almost entirely Malaysians, Singaporeans, Thais, and other Southeast Asian residents. This could be interpreted as cultural bias. People in Malaysia are more likely to believe these things because they've been taught to believe them. Or it could be interpreted as experiential knowledge. People living in Southeast Asia encounter these phenomena regularly and have adapted their practices accordingly, while outsiders dismiss what they haven't personally experienced. Alyssa didn't try to convince the skeptics. She simply continued sharing protective practices with people who reported experiencing the knocking phenomenon, and she noticed that those who followed the advice reported success. One woman who had been experiencing repeated knocking every night for a week wrote to Alyssa saying, "I followed your advice from the article. I bought red string, made salt water, hung talismans on my doors, and performed the prayer ritual you described. I played the Quran recitation loudly in my apartment. The knocking stopped that same night. For the first time in a week, I slept through the night. I don't know if I believe in spirits or not, but I believe that what you suggested works. Thank you for sharing this knowledge." The question that emerges from all these stories is, why does the protective ritual work so effectively? If the knocking is just imagination or misinterpreted sounds, then the ritual shouldn't matter. A person should have the same rate of success just by convincing themselves nothing is real. But that's not what happens. The ritual works specifically and reliably. The moment protective measures are put in place, mirrors, talismans, salt, prayers, the phenomenon stops. Malaysian spiritual traditions offer an explanation. The protective measures work because they're spiritually genuine. The mirrors reflect spiritual energy. The talismans carry protective power, blessed by spiritual authorities. The salt creates a barrier. Spirits cannot cross. The prayers invoke divine protection. Whether you accept that supernatural explanation or not, the practical reality is that these measures work consistently enough that Malaysian people continue to use them as standard practice during Ghost Month. Modern psychologists might offer an alternative explanation. The ritual works through placebo effect, an increased sense of control. By performing a structured ritual, people feel empowered rather than victimized. They're taking action, creating mental fortification, and psychologically resisting the fear that made them vulnerable to seeing, hearing supernatural phenomena in the first place. Both explanations might be partially true. The supernatural protection might be real, but its effectiveness might be amplified by the psychological confidence that accompanies ritual completion. But here's what matters most. The people who follow the protective practices stay safe during Ghost Month. The people who ignore the warnings frequently experience problems. Alyssa, after her initial frightening experience, became a strong advocate for Ghost Month precautions. Every year since 2019, she shared information on her social media encouraging Malaysians, especially young people living alone, to take Ghost Month seriously. She's prepared a resource packet that includes a calendar showing Ghost Month dates for the next 5 years, a list of protective items to have on hand, red string, salt, incense, specific prayers and talismans from multiple traditions, instructions for basic cleansing rituals per adaptation, interpretation of the term. Kostet punsurisval a flowchart of what to do if you experience knocking or other Ghost Month phenomena. a list of local spiritual practitioners, monks, balmo, etc., who perform stronger protection rituals if needed. She's also been contacted by other young Malaysians who've had similar experiences and wanted advice. In one case, she actually guided a woman through a ghost month incident in real time via phone call. The woman, named Prem, texted Alyssa saying, "I hear knocking and my family isn't home, just me. What do I do?" Alyssa immediately called her and gave her step-by-step instructions. Go to your bedroom and lock the door. Turn on all the lights. And all the lights. Sorn all the lights I'll call. Rachel Dolphin Loda. Call someone you trust and stay on the phone. Don't answer any knocks. Don't look through the peephole. Don't acknowledge the knocking in any way. The spirit is testing you. If you ignore it for 30-45 minutes, it will move on. Prem followed the instructions. The knocking continued for about 40 minutes, then stopped abruptly. Prem texted, "It stopped. I'm okay. Thank you so much." Alyssa advised her to do a cleansing ritual the next day and to never stay alone during Ghost Month again. This kind of real-time support has become informal community protection. Young Malaysians who experience Ghost Month phenomena contact people like Alyssa, who've learned how to handle these situations safely. What's significant is that this knowledge, once confined to elderly women telling their grandchildren about ancient superstitions, has now become practical safety information, shared among Gen Z Malaysians through Facebook, WhatsApp, TikTok, and Instagram. Modern technology has amplified traditional knowledge, rather than replacing it. If anything, Ghost Month safety practices are becoming more widespread and systematized rather than fading away as younger generations become more secular and modern. The young Malaysians following these practices aren't doing so because they blindly accept their grandmother's superstitions. They're doing so because they've witnessed or experienced the phenomena firsthand, and they've tested whether the protective practices work. And consistently, across hundreds or thousands of individual cases, the practices do work. 7 years after her original experience, Alyssa is now 29 years old, living in a house in Klang with her husband, a child, and her grandmother. She no longer lives alone during Ghost Month, but not just because she's married. More importantly, her home has permanent spiritual protection established through ritual and practice. Her grandmother performed a comprehensive blessing ceremony when Alyssa first moved in, and they maintain protective practices year-round. This is actually the traditional Malaysian approach to home protection. Don't just protect during Ghost Month. Maintain ongoing spiritual maintenance to keep your home safe from all types of spiritual intrusion throughout the year. Alyssa's home has mirrors hung at specific strategic locations, reflecting outward. Red cloth strips placed above doors and windows, replaced yearly. A small altar with offerings for protective spirits. Salt placed on windowsills, refreshed monthly. Prayers spoken regularly. Spoken for Wandao. Incense burned at specific times. A Quranic verse written and framed for Islamic protection layer. Traditional Buddhist talismans received from a temple. This layering of protection from multiple traditions, Chinese spiritual practice, Islamic prayer, Buddhist blessings, is typical of Malaysian homes. Rather than seeing these as conflicting beliefs, Malaysians see them as complementary protective measures, each addressing a different aspect of spiritual safety. When Alyssa's son turned 5, she began teaching him the Ghost Month rules, just as her grandmother had taught her. Never answer the door when you're home alone after 11 p.m., she told him. If you hear knocking, even if it sounds like me or your father, don't open the door. Tell a grown-up immediately. Why, Mama? He asked. Because during Ghost Month, spirits try to trick people by pretending to be someone we love. If we open the door, the spirit can come inside, so we keep the door closed, keep the mirrors up, and stay safe. The child accepted this matter-of-factly, the way children accept information from authority figures. For him, it will simply be a standard part of growing up in Malaysia. Just like he's learning to speak Malay and English, he's also learning spiritual safety practices. When asked if she regrets her initial decision to ignore her grandmother's warnings and stay alone during Ghost Month, Alyssa is thoughtful. I don't regret the experience, because it taught me something real. I learned that the old knowledge my grandmother had wasn't superstition. It was practical survival information, based on generations of experience. And I learned that even modern, educated, secular young people can benefit from that knowledge. So in a way, I'm grateful for the frightening experience, because it made me understand that my grandmother wasn't being backwards or irrational. She was sharing information that could keep me safe. And this perspective respecting old knowledge, not as superstition, but as practical information, represents a shift happening across Malaysia and Southeast Asia among younger generations. They're not converting to fundamentalist belief in supernatural entities, but they're also not dismissing their elders' warnings as meaningless superstition. Instead, they're taking the pragmatic approach. If these protective practices work, and they consistently do, then regardless of whether you believe in spirits, following the practices makes sense. It's risk management. It's harm reduction. It's being smart about a phenomenon you don't fully understand. During Ghost Month 2024, which occurred about 6 months before the filming of this video, Alyssa noticed something interesting. Far fewer young Malaysians reported frightening Ghost Month incidents than in previous years. Not because the spirits had become less active, but because information about protective practices had spread so widely through social media and word of mouth that more young people were taking precautions. She theorizes that this represents a cultural adaptation. As knowledge about Ghost Month safety spreads, more people follow the practices, and therefore fewer people have negative experiences, which then reinforces the effectiveness of the protective measures. It's a positive feedback loop that's actually making Ghost Month safer for everyone. Alyssa is now working on a book about Ghost Month in Malaysia, not as supernatural tourism, but as practical cultural knowledge that young Malaysians need to understand. Her message is consistent and straightforward. Ghost Month is real, in the sense that something happens during that period that can be dangerous if you're unprepared. Whether you call it supernatural spirits, or environmental psychological phenomena, or cultural belief-induced hallucinations, the practical advice is the same. Follow the protective practices. Don't stay alone if possible. Don't answer doors to unknown callers after dark, and take seriously the warnings your elders are giving you. Your grandmother isn't being backwards or superstitious. She's sharing information that could save you from a frightening experience. I learned this the hard way. I ignored the warnings and experienced something genuinely terrifying. But I survived, because the protective measures worked. And now I share that same knowledge with the next generation, just like my grandmother shared it with me. Ghost Month is only dangerous if you're unprepared or arrogant enough to think modern rationality makes you immune to what people have been warning about for thousands of years. But if you respect the season, follow the practices, and listen to your elders, you'll be safe. This represents the essence of how Malaysia and Southeast Asia more broadly is navigating tradition and modernity, not by abandoning the old for the new, but by finding practical ways to maintain traditional knowledge while living in modern contexts. Ghost Month safety isn't something you have to choose between being modern or respecting tradition. It's something you can do while maintaining both. You can be educated, skeptical, modern, and rational, and you can still not answer knocks on your door after 11 p.m. during Ghost Month. Because some things are true regardless of whether you believe in them.